Hi everyone, I'm Peace
And I'm Danielle.
and we are sixth year medical students. And in this video, we thought we'd just give a brief introduction to intimate partner violence or IPV and explain how it manifests, like the different manifestations of it or the different types of intimate partner violence.
So, intimate partner violence is broadly defined as any behavior within a close relationship that causes either physical, sexual, or psychological harm. And this is quite a sort of broad definition that encompasses a few different types.
Yeah, and I think often when people think about intimate partner violence, the first thing they think about is physical or sexual violence. And these are two of the, I don't say the easiest ways to see it, but often when people report it, when people think about someone who's a survivor of intimate partner violence, they think it must be physical abuse where someone is physically harming someone. It's often also easier to see because you see the physical bruises, you see the broken bones, and sexual violence is also one type of IPV. And I think it's important to note that as we go through the different types, they can often coexist. So someone could be a survivor of sexual violence and physical violence, and the others we'll talk about. I think that physical and sexual violence in our setting, which is a really, really sad thing to say, are often well understood because we see it so commonly. And I think it's also important to note that there are other types of IPV and there can be like an escalation through the different types. And so it's important to notice them.
Definitely. With that said, I think it's also quite important to have a really clear definition for yourselves on what sexual assault actually is and what rape is and so on, because these definitions have been quite sort of poorly understood, and they've also changed in the legislation over the last few decades, but I'm sure that will be covered in another video. Then to move on from sort of physical abuse and sexual assault, some of the other types of intimate partner violence that are really, really common are the more psychological abuse, verbal abuse, and emotional abuse. So that's things like when people are humiliated by their partners in public, or when they're called derogatory names in public, that sort of thing. And that sort of systematic breaking down of a person's emotional state that can be very deliberate. And sometimes this might be like difficult to tease apart from normal conflict within a relationship, but when it's done in a way that's like intentionally harmful and that causes psychological damage over time, that is completely different and far more serious than everyday sort of conflict.
An example of this psychological manipulation and abuse is gaslighting, where somebody slowly places doubt in their partner's mind as to their mental well-being, be it their memory or their self-esteem or any number of things. And this can be quite a serious form of IPV.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to know that there's also like key like red flags, things like isolation when in a relationship someone or the perpetrator tries to like separate the survivor from friends, family, from support system. There's things like monitoring. So I need to know your timetable. I need to know where you'll be at this time. Tell me where you are. If the perpetrator doesn't know where the survivor is, it becomes a big thing. And I think fear is a big thing. Like Danielle, like you were saying about sometimes it's difficult to tease out, but that overwhelming sense of fear that survivors feel, that isn't healthy, and that is definitely a red flag. And I think it's like it's seeped into popular culture in various ways to a point where like sometimes you wonder, is it highlighting the importance or like raising awareness about intimate partner violence, or is it just sort of trivializing it and making it something that we consume and don't see the problem with? I don't know if anyone's watched You, but there you see like really hectic ways of like a really like hectic way example of intimate partner violence. You see like the stalking,
sort of stalking and harassment side. And
I mean that's definitely a type of IPV, and even in our setting more and more, like you think of stalking, you think, okay, someone's car is following you or someone's always showing up at the same restaurants you're in, but now like stalking can follow you to your house, can follow you everywhere because of social media.
Yeah, yeah. And I think sometimes people don't consider that that people that are close to them and that are in their lives are actually stalking them and are harassing them. So you picture somebody that you don't really know doing that, but actually recognizing that your own partner is doing that can be quite difficult.
Yeah. And I think it's that subtle change. And I think sometimes IPV can be such a subtle thing. The subtle change from, like the subtle changes from I care about you to I need to control you. I need to know where you are, what you're doing, who you're with. Speaking of forms of control, we mentioned like monitoring movement and all of that. But another way that is leads itself to control is economic abuse, economic violence. And this, I mean, it takes on various ways, and sometimes it's quite difficult to tease out because, you know, that thing of one person's earning money or one person's earning more than the other person. And then it's difficult to see, like, well, it is their money, but you see it in terms of how someone sort of uses that as a way to dominate over another person, people begging for money for basic needs or counting pennies just to, I mean, buy food or spend any money on themselves.
Yeah. And I think we see it also when people have no control over the household finances. So when, be it the breadwinner or sometimes even not the breadwinner, is the person that has all say over how money is spent and everything else needs to be kept track of. Yeah, I think that's quite a common form of economic abuse.
Yeah, and with that, it just leads to more control. So I think a big part of IPV is control. And if I have no money to buy petrol, I have no money for public transport, I have no agency to go anywhere or do anything without asking permission.
Yeah,
and that
creates that dependency that makes it incredibly difficult for people to leave or to even imagine a different circumstance. Those are just some of the broad and very, very common types of intimate partner violence that we see in a clinical setting. And yeah, just being highly vigilant, particularly of the more subtle types of violence, is really important.
Yeah, and I think this conversation is very triggering. As future health professionals, it's very triggering because we are still human beings and we are still people and we do interact with other people. And it's difficult talking about a topic that we will one day and even currently need to assist our patients through and identify in our patients, knowing that some of us might be survivors. So if it is triggering for you, please do reach out to a mentor you know and you trust, a friend you know and you trust, or even Dr. Gordon. Her email address is freely available, and I'm sure she'll be able to be a place of containment for you. Bye, everyone.